Hi, my name is Rahama and I'm the principal of Mayfield Secondary School, and I'm going to be talking about the issue vaping and how it's very detrimental to our students and how we can combat it in a very positive way. Well, first I'm going to be going to what is vaping, then a brief introduction, which includes my hypothesis and everything. Then I'm going to be relating it back to things such as anthropology, psychology, and sociology to really understand what we're dealing with. Then I'm going to end off with a conclusion. So now I'm just going to be talking about what exactly vaping is. So vaping is the act of inhaling vapor produced by an electric cigarette. So they're very popularly known as e-cigarettes or other vaping devices. And these devices use a battery-powered heating system to heat the liquid, which is called e-liquid or vape juice, which is commonly used by a lot of the young people nowadays. And it typically contains nicotine, flavoring, and other chemicals, which is why it's so appealing to the younger generation. When heated, the liquid turns into a vapor that is inhaled by the person that is using the e cigarettes. And vaping is often seen as a less harmful alternative to smoking. So traditional cigarettes, as it doesn't involve burning tobacco, and it produces harmful tar and other toxic substances. However, vaping still possesses serious health risks, especially for young people. It took us many years to find out that smoking was bad for you after many doctors found out that that's the reason why so many people were dying. So, how many more people need to die from vapes, e cigarettes, for people to realize that's very bad for you? And why is vaping so important to high schoolers? I'm sure a lot of you guys are asking this question. So vaping has become a very significant issue for high school students for several reasons. For one, it's very popular among teens. Like vaping has grown rapidly in popularity among teenagers, with many young people viewing it as a trend or social activity. The flavors in e-liquids like fruit and candy flavors make vaping appealing to teens, and the devices themselves are often sleek and discreet, which makes them very easy to hide. Thus, why we have such a big issue with this. Peer pressure. When you're in high school and you're adolescent, it's a time when people are particularly very influenced by their peers, and this is because your brain is also not fully developed. And the desire to fit in and be accepted can make high school students very susceptible to trying to vape and just be cool. There's also other health issues like a nicotine addiction, and you're being it's just very bad for your body overall. And lastly, social influence and marketing isn't helping either. Because e-cigarettes are flavored, many people see it as something fun and not something serious, but it can lead to various serious health issues. And we need to start to address this in high schools. We can, for one, start preventing addiction, protecting long-term health, reducing peer pressure, creating support systems, and promoting a healthy environment. I know you're asking, how are we going to do this? Well, just wait and I'll explain it throughout the entire video. So as you can see, there is a graph of the amount of people that are vaping at Mayfield Secondary School. However, since we have over 2,000 students, we decided to decrease the sample size to about 40 students. But as you can see from the results, it's very, very ridiculous. From the grade 9s, 15 of them are reported vaping, 16 of the grade 10s are reported vaping as well, 7 of the grade 11s are reported vaping, and 2 of the grade 12s have been reported vaping. This is a very large amount, and the fact that the large numbers are coming from our junior grades is very distressful, and this is why throughout this presentation we will be talking about ways we can fix it and why this is even happening. Now I'm going to be tying back why we have this vaping issue to three major connections. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be connecting it to anthropology, psychology, and sociology. So, with anthropology and vaping at Mayfield, there's a cultural context of vaping at school. So, anthropology can help you understand how different cultural groups within your school, Mayfield, age, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, approach vaping. For example, certain peer groups or social circles might normalize or encourage vaping, making it more relevant or prevalent in those specific groups. Second, there's intergenerational influence. So anthropological studies could also focus on how attitudes toward smoking and vaping were passed down within families or communities, which influence students at Mayfield. So maybe their parents or their uncles or their aunties or their sisters, maybe they did it, or maybe they tried it and now they're just passing it on. As for psychology, there's a psychological impact of vaping on students as well. So psychology just examines how vaping affects mental health, and it's, as we can see, it's very prevalent among Mayfield students. It also leads to the problem of addiction and peer influence and decision making. As I mentioned earlier, since you're a teen, it's very easy for you to make hard decisions or difficult decisions and fall into the hands of something bad. And lastly, sociology and vaping at Mayfield. So social norms and peer influence. Maybe it's normal. So many people are doing it. Let me try. That's probably the thought process. And there's also school policies and public health that we can put in place to help these Mayfield students be put on the right path again. So there's two main types of anthropologies that I want to talk about, but for now I'm going to talk about physical anthropology. So to connect vaping's physical anthropology, we can consider how vaping intersects with the biological and evolutionary aspects of human behavior, health, and development. So here's how physical anthropology can contribute to understanding of vaping, and for one, its impact on human physiology. So one is respiratory health. So physical anthropology focuses on understanding human biology and evolution, including how environmental factors affect the body. So vaping as an activity involving inhaling substances like nicotine and other chemicals can have a significant impact on the lungs and overall respiratory health, which is why you often see a lot of people coughing. Physical anthropologists may study how the body responds to these chemicals over time and whether long term vaping could lead to chronic respiratory issues or even change in lung infection, similar to how smoking does. And also, there's addiction to the brain. So, physical anthropology includes the study of human evolution and how the brain has developed over time, and nicotine affects the brain reward system. And physical anthropologists may be interested in how the substances like nicotine can influence human evolution by altering their brain chemistry. So, this could be more specifically with the rising popularity of vaping among adolescents, so teenagers, understanding the addictive nature of nicotine from an evolutionary perspective, so how it is over time, and it could offer insights into how addiction mechanisms have developed in humans. And I'm also going to be relating this back to Charles Darwin, who's a very, very, very famous anthropologist, and I'm also going to be talking about his theory of evolution as well. So, yes. Human adaptation and evolutionary perspective as my second one. So, for one, it's adaptation to toxins. So, over the course of human evolution, our bodies have developed in various ways and mechanisms to deal with the environment and toxins. For example, survival of the fittest with Charles Darwin. And physical anthropologists might explore how humans have adapted to these substances like nicotine and whether vaping, with its use of different chemicals, possesses a new challenge to these adaptive mechanisms, which in the long run is most likely since it does more harm than good compared to what a lot of the scientists have said. Next is the cultural evolution of vaping. So vaping can be seen as part of modern culture shift, like, hey, I'm cool, in which technology and social practices influence human behavior. So from a physical anthropology standpoint or perspective, studying how humans have incorporated new habits like vaping into their daily routines can help understand the interaction between biological processes and cultural practices, particularly in the context of modern health trends. So, to connect physical anthropologists and their theories to vaping, I want to consider how key anthropologists' work on human biology, evolution, and culture might help us understand the biological and social implications of vaping. So, here's some very famous or notable physical anthropologists and theories that can be related to the issue of vaping. For one, Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution by natural selection. So, to connect it to vaping, Darwin's theory of evolution focuses on how human species adapt to environmental processes or pressures over generations. So, from this perspective, you can really analyze how behaviors like vaping could influence human health over time and whether nicotine or other chemicals could become an evolutionary pressure. For instance, if vaping leads to long term health problems, future generations may evolve to be more resistant to these chemicals, though it is more likely that vaping would contribute to health challenges rather than beneficial evolutionary changes and impacts on human adaptation. So Darwin's theory could also be applied to understand how humans have adapted biologically to environmental factors, including the use of substances like nicotine. As vaping becomes more widespread and more popularized, it may exert very selective pressures on human physiology, potentially leading to changes in how the body metabolizes nicotine or how humans respond to the chemical exposure. So next we're going to be talking about Franz Boas, who's also known for his cultural relativism and human plasticity theory. He's also a little bit of cultural anthropology, but he also has a lot of very interesting aspects when it comes to physical anthropology, so I wanted to include him in this section. So, to connect it to vaping, France was often who was referred to as the father of modern anthropology, which is a pretty cool name if you think about it, is really emphasizing cultural relativism, which is the idea that human behavior and practices should be understood in their cultural context rather than judged by external standards. So, from his perspective, the widespread adaptation or adoption of vaping can be viewed as a cultural practice that should be understood in terms of social, economic, and technological factors that have led to its popularity, particularly among adolescents. But he also emphasized human plasticity, or the ability of humans to adapt to different environments. This concept could be applied to how humans are adapting to new technologies and the risk of health introduced by vaping. So, the rise of vaping may be in response to growing awareness of the dangers of smoking, but it also introduces new health risks. So, like illustrating how humans continuously adapt to changing environments, pressure, and social norms. So, even though we are trying to get rid of the problem vaping, the reason as to why I included cultural relativism is because it's important to do it in a good way. There have been a lot of backfires from judging people and being too pushy about what they should and should not do. And since you're a teenager, you don't really want to listen since your brain is still developing. So the reason as to why I included this is just so it's a reminder to not judge but be responsible with how we deal with the situation. Next, we have Richard Leakey, and I'm going to be talking about his theory of the evolution of human adaptation. So, Richard Leakey's research focused on human evolution, particularly the development of hominids, which their adaptations to environmental pressures was very unique and very special. So, the Leakeys worked very it really highlighted how human evolution is shaped by environmental factors. So, vaping could also be understood as a new form of environmental pressure on human biology, which is kind of a different perspective as it introduces new substances into the body that could affect long term health and evolution. And relating it back to human evolution and modern behavior, the Leakey's focus on the relationship between human evolution and the environment that could be applied to understanding how modern behaviors like vaping interact with our biological evolution. So, as new substances like those found in e cigarettes become more common, they can affect human development and health in ways that future generations may need to adapt, which is similar to Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. Finally, I'm going to be talking about Jane Goodall, and she focuses on primate behavior and social learning. So, while Jane Goodall is best known for her studies on chimpanzees, her research on social learning and the transmission of behaviors in primates can be applied to understanding how vaping behaviors are spread among human populations. So, if adolescents learn vaping behaviors through peer influence or social learning, the mirrors similar behavior observed in primates. So this could lead to a greater understanding of how vaping has become normalized in certain social circles and how peer influence can affect health-related behaviors. And for cultural transmission of behavior, Goodall's work on the transmission of behaviors in social groups could be used to study how vaping spreads among students, particularly in social environments like schools where peer pressure plays a significant role in behavioral choices. To connect cultural anthropologists and their theories to vaping, we can really talk about how cultural practices, social norms, and environmental factors influence human behavior, and how vaping as a cultural phenomenon some, or something different fits in with these frameworks. So here are two pretty famous cultural anthropologists and their theories that can relate to vaping. So one is Clifford Gretz, and he's going to be talking about symbolic interactionism and culture as a web of significance. So this is, I know it's kind of a mouthful, but that's his theory. So to connect it to vaping, Clifford is known for his approach on the symbolic interactionism, where culture is seen as a web of meanings. So to put it in simple terms, people use this to interpret and act in the world. So he famously referred to a culture as a web of significance, so something very important. And in this context, vaping can be viewed as a part of a larger cultural system with specific meanings attached to it. For example, vaping might symbolize rebellion, modern, being modern, or an alternative to smoking, which carries its own cultural connections in society, cultural meaning, and social influence. So it would suggest that to understand vaping fully, you need to examine the symbols and meanings attached to it in different social groups, For teenagers, vaping may be seen as a social marker or a status symbol, so representing a certain lifestyle or a certain identity of someone. So the use of different flavors, brands, and devices may also have specific cultural meanings depending on the group. So vaping in this context is not just a behavior but a cultural practice with its own set of symbols, social meanings, and significance as well. And next or last is social learning and interpretation. So Clifford's theory really highlights how people actively create and interpret meaning in their lives. So teenagers or young adults may even talk about vaping because it's perceived or engage in vaping because it's perceived as a part of their social identity or as a way to fit in with certain peer groups. So, from Gret's perspective, we could really study the cultural context of vaping by exploring how different groups, for example, age groups, subcultures, and communities, interpret and give meaning to vaping so that when we actually combat vaping and try and make people, stop vaping, then we can do it in a very healthy way. Now I'm going to be talking about Mary Douglas, who is the beautiful lady on the right, and she mainly talked about purity and danger. So, Mary Douglas is best known for her work on the concept of ritual, purity, and pollution, which is very significant and kind of ironic if you think about it when you're talking about it with this issue. But in her book Purity and Danger, she really explores how different cultures create boundaries around what is considered pure or acceptable and what is seen as dangerous or polluting. So this concept can be applied to vaping in a sense that maybe it can be viewed as a form of cultural pollution or practice that disrupts social norms around health and well-being. So, from Douglas' perspective, the rise of vaping could be understood as a ritual practice that marks the departure from a traditional form of smoking or social behaviors, so something different. So vaping has become a cultural practice in itself if you really think about it. So it's often tied to youth subcultures. For instance, vaping rituals such as the choosing of flavor, sharing the devices among friends, or performing tricks, right? So I guess blowing some type of air bubbles. So it can be seen as a part of a social ritual that helps the group form an identity. And these rituals challenge social boundaries in regarding to what is considered healthy or acceptable. And lastly, cultural boundaries and defiance. So, or deviance, sorry. In many cultures, smoking, as long as it's been considered dangerous. Not always, but now that we know it's dangerous and unhealthy, there are strict boundaries in place regarding the public smoking of cigarettes. Vaping, however, is still new, and its status is ambiguous in many societies. So it can be seen as a challenge or to cultural taboos and boundaries. So, for example, some people vaping as a less harmful alternative to smoking, while others view as equally dangerous, representing a transgression of health boundaries. So, cultural anthropologists might study how vaping is either accepted or stigmatized within different cultures and how these perceptions of purity and danger influence vaping behavior. And now I'm going to be talking about connections to psychology. So, vaping can be explored from a psychological perspective as it involves various aspects of behavior, motivations, and mental processes. So, psychological theories and concepts can really help us understand why people, especially teenagers, particularly engage in vaping and how it influences their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So, there's connections to several psychological theories and concepts, and for one is motivation. So, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So, vaping can be seen as influenced by intrinsic motivation, personal enjoyment, or stress relief, or extrinsic motivation, peer pressure, or social acceptance. So, for example, some individuals may smoke because they find it relaxing, or they feel it helps with anxiety or stress. Others may be motivated by external factors such as peer influence or the desire to fit in with a social group, particularly among adolescents. So, in this sense, vaping might serve as a tool for socialization or to conform to group norms. Next is self determination theory. So, according to this theory, individuals are motivated or driven by a desire to satisfy three basic psychological needs: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So, in this case, vaping in adolescents may engage in the behavior to assert their autonomy because they see vaping as a way to bond with their peers, friends. So, it's just a way to be more popular or to have friends or just to talk to people. However, if vaping becomes a way to cope with feelings, it may lead to a lack of control and it could lead to a response in a lot of psychological needs that need to be taken care of. Next is behavioral conditioning and vaping. So one is something called operant conditioning. So from a behavioral psychology perspective, vaping can be viewed through the lens of reinforcement. So positive reinforcement occurs when vaping provides a reward, such as the feeling of relaxation, a temporary boost in your mood, or social approval from peers. And if these rewards are very frequent and they're strong enough, the behavior of vaping becomes reinforced, and individuals may continue to increase the behavior over time. Or oppositely, negative reinforcement could involve vaping to escape negative emotions like stress, anxiety, or social pressures, and reinforcing the behavior as a coping mechanism. There's also classical conditioning. So classical conditioning can explain how environmental cues such as certain location, people, or social context becomes associated with the act of vaping at a specific time or day in a specific setting. And over time, these cues, locations, or social settings may trigger the urge to vape, even without the presence of nicotine. And this process of conditioning can really make vaping more habitual and ingrained. So, for one, there's psychological impacts of vaping. So, cognitive dissonance. So, cognitive dissonance suggests that people experience discomfort when they hold conflicting beliefs or attitudes. So, if a person knows that vaping is harmful, right, but they continue to do it, they may experience psychological discomfort. So, to solve this dissonance, they justify their behavior by focusing on short-term pleasures. So, experience from vaping or minimizing the risk involved. So, they basically, in youth terms, they gaslight themselves into thinking that it's fine. So, this process helps them feel less conflicted about their actions and reduces feelings of guilt or anxiety associated with their behavior. Next is addiction and habit formation. So, vaping can lead to psychological dependence. So, addiction, being held on something. So, especially when an individual uses nicotine-based products. So, the dopamine is released, and it occurs with nicotine, and it reinforces the pleasure. Associated with vaping. So, over time, the individual may develop a habitual craving for the psychological reward of vaping, leading to a form of addiction. But psychological dependence on vaping can manifest in the need to continue vaping to maintain a sense of well-being or relief from negative feelings, even if they face health risks. Next is vaping and mental health. So, vaping can be used as a stress and coping mechanism. So, psychology also suggests that individuals may turn to vaping as a coping mechanism for stress, anxiety, or depression. So, vaping might provide a temporary sense of relief or relaxation, especially if an individual uses it to self medicate negative emotions. However, it creates a cycle where they're not able to escape from. So, it's very dependent based. Next is the impact of emotional regulation. So, emotional regulation refers to how you're able to manage and respond to emotional experiences. So, adolescents and young adults who struggle with emotional regulation might use vaping to regulate their emotions, either by providing a sense of calm distraction from their emotional distress. However, over time, this could really exacerbate difficulties for emotional regulations as vaping becomes a primary method for coping with emotions rather than just developing a healthy relationship and coping strategies. So now I'm just going to be talking about the psychologists and their theories. So I'm going to be talking about, for one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is the man on the left. So his theory of needs is like a motivational theory that proposes humans have a five-tiered hierarchy of needs, ranging from basic psychological needs of self-actualization, and these needs must be fulfilled in order with lower level of needs like food and safety, security, everything, and it takes priority over high level needs like self esteem and personal growth. So, for one, how it relates to vaping. So, vaping can be seen as a behavior that addresses certain levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For one, is the physiological needs. So, nicotine, which is often a key ingredient in vape, stimulates the brain and may provide relief from the physical cravings of withdrawal symptoms, addressing basic physiological needs. So, people may use vaping to satisfy their body need for more nicotine, especially if they're being addicted. And it also relates to social needs as well, so belonging and love. So, a major motivator for teenagers vaping is a desire for social acceptance. So, just to feel like you have friends and that you belong. So, as a peer group or when you're in social circles, vaping might be seen as the norm or a way to bond, and teenagers might even turn to vaping to fulfill the need of a connection and social acceptance. By engaging in this behavior, they feel like they're like a part of a group, a small family, fulfilling their emotional needs for relationship and belonging. And there's also self-esteem needs. So vaping can also address esteem needs, particularly in young people. If an individual perceives vaping as a way to gain social status, respect, or admiration within their social circle, they'll do it. They'll engage in the behavior to boost their self-esteem and feel validated by others. So now I'm going to be talking about B.F. Skinner, who is the man on the right. So his theory is that you heard about this earlier, but I'm just going to dive into more detail. So for his theory, there's operant conditioning, which suggests that behaviors are influenced by the consequences they produce. And according to B.F. Skinner, behaviors followed by positive reinforcement rewards are likely to be repeated, whereas behaviors followed by negative reinforcement or punishment are less likely to occur. So vaping behaviors can be understood through the lens of operant conditioning as the behavior is reinforced by rewards and avoidance of negative outcomes. So with a positive reinforcement, if a teenager vapes and experiences positive outcomes such as feelings, being relaxed, socially accepted, or enjoyed the sensory aspects of vaping, like the flavor, the sensation, this behavior is positively reinforced, right? Because at the end of the day, they feel like the reward is much better than punishment, which is in this case their health. As a result, the teenager is likely to continue vaping to uh, be more pleasurable and just be happy. However, with negative reinforcement, it could also be at play if individuals use vaping to escape or reduce negative feelings such as stress, anxiety, or peer pressure. And if vaping provides relief from these emotions, it reinforces the behavior because the individual is motivated to avoid those negative feelings that we're experiencing. And so to solve this, we have to go at the core. So we have to make sure these people have good self-esteem, good friend groups. They're happy, we teach them how to be responsible and how to deal with emotions so that we can ensure that the vaping issue is greatly reduced. Now I'm going to be connecting things to sociology. So vaping really is is very similar to concepts of conformity, primary agents of socialization, which is your family, and secondary agents of socialization. And they each play different roles in shaping your decision to vape. So for one, conformity. So it refers to when someone wants to align with one's beliefs, behaviors, or attitudes with those of a group or societal norms. So it's influenced by their desire to fit in and avoid rejection or negative judgment from others. So, for one, it relates to vaping because conformity is a significant factor in why teenagers may want to begin vaping. So, vaping becomes popular within a peer group. Individuals may feel pressured to conform to this to gain acceptance to avoid being ostracized. So, for instance, if a group vapes and it's considered normal or cool, then someone else that doesn't vape might be singled out or feel embarrassed. And that's why they would want to vape. Second is social influence. So many young people are also influenced by what they see on social media platforms. So conformity is a very powerful factor here as individuals may imitate influencers or celebrities who promote vaping. So seeing as it is socially acceptable or glamorized, this external pressure can really lead to a lot of people to conform to the behaviors and trends that are popular within their social circles regarding any of the health consequences. And next, relating it back to the primary agent of socialization, which is your family. Um, One, family plays a key role in shaping attitudes towards smoking and vaping and other health related behaviors. So, for instance, if a family member is a smoker or even a vapor, or vapes, this behavior may be normalized within the family unit. So, children and many young adults who grew up around this family member who vape may view it as acceptable or even a part of adulthood. So they just see it as normal and they feel like they're able to do it and they also have access to it as well. Next is role models. So parents or guardians serve as a primary role model for children, and that is so important. So if they vape or engage in other behaviors related to vaping, their actions may directly influence how their children perceive and engage with vaping. So conversely, families that emphasize healthy behaviors and discourage substances may use it or may serve as a protective factor against people that want to vape. So if your family is very against vaping, the chances that you're going to start vaping isn't as high because they're not the ones that are going to be vaping, so you're not going to have easy access to it. Next is the secondary agents of socialization, so peers, schools, media. So for peer groups, if a teenager enters a social circle, they might want to vape, so they're not seen as different. And for educational settings, it's very difficult for students to vape in specific areas because we do have measures put in place at Mayfield to ensure that students don't vape. However, because it's so tiny, people are able to sneak it around and try and vape, which is why we're trying to solve this issue. Next is media influence. So the media plays a huge role socializing young people into vaping culture because vapes are colorful and they taste good and they smell good. A lot of people want to do it, and they're targeting youth, and it can lead them to perceive as an aspirational type of behavior as well. So now I'm going to be talking about sociologists that theories can relate back to the issue we're facing at hand. So for one is Emil Durkheim, who is the person on the left, and he is focusing on the social integration and anomie. So he is known for social integration and anomie, and it refers to the degree of which people feel connected to their community or society, while anomie refers to a state of normalness, so a breakdown of social norms, typically in times of rapid social change, which is very important to the issue that we're facing at hand. So Durkheim's theory of anomie can be applied to the understanding of why people, particularly young people, may engage in behaviors like vaping. In times of social disintegration or significant cultural shifts, people may feel disconnected from societal norms and thus seek an alternative, which means of belonging or coping. So vaping can be seen as a response of this sense of anomie in which individuals turn to vaping to fulfill the need of social connections or just to deal with personal stress, as I mentioned earlier. And vaping as a social right. So, in opposite of what society thinks, vaping may be normalized in certain social groups, creating a subculture where it's viewed as socially acceptable or even desired behavior. And in situations where traditional societal norms like family expectations or school policies seem to break down or are unclear, adolescents might turn to vaping as a way of fitting in with peers and gaining a sense of social integration. Next, I'm talking about Karl Marx, conflict theory, and he is the person on the right. So, for one, his theory relates to vaping. So, from a Marxist perspective, the vaping industry can be seen as a profit driven sector that capitalizes on youth culture and their public perceptions about safety of vaping compared to smoking. So, they're just coming after the youth because they feel like they're gullible. So, companies in the vape industry often target young people through advertisements, influencers, and social media, creating a market where people, especially adolescents, are encouraged to spend money on vaping products. So, the capitalist motive behind the vaping industry benefits from the normalization of vaping behaviors among young people, thus driving up sales and ensuring profitability for these companies. And there's class inequalities in access as well. So, vaping products, like many other consumer goods, are often, well, in this case, not much for good, but they're often marketed as a luxury or a status symbol. While vaping may be seen as an alternative to smoking, for some others, they may view it as a form of rebellion or differentiation from social norms, and those in lower socioeconomic classes are more likely to vape because of the relative affordability of e cigarettes compared to traditional cigarettes or other forms of consumption, which brings back my point of them feeling that teens are very gullible because they don't have a lot of money. They're able to buy e-cigarettes because they're a lot cheaper, and it leads to a form of social stratification and equality based on vaping access. So this is exactly why we need to cut to the issue at hand and just get the issue at the core. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, the solution. So, to counteract this normalization, the school, Mayfield Secondary, we are going to implement a student lead peer mentorship program. So, we're going to call Vape Free Leaders. So, this program will recruit respected and influential students from diverse social groups and become ambassadors of a healthy behavior. So, because Mayfield is also an art school, we are thinking, or I am thinking, of including people from each different art, so visual arts, dance, music, like vocals, so that they can be very influential. So these ambassadors will undergo training with school counselors and public health experts to learn how to effectively discuss the risks of vaping and promote healthier alternatives. Because coming from adults, it might seem boring or even dull, but coming from your own peers may be more impactful. So they're going to host small group discussions with peers, creating safe spaces where students can share their thoughts on vaping without the fear of being judged, and they can promote positive behaviors. So by organizing engaging school events such as sports tournaments, talent shows, or wellness days that showcase non-vaping students as role models. And also, we can have a leverage on social media by sharing posts, videos, and stories that highlight the benefit of vape-free lifestyle. So you don't need to vape to have fun. And it demonstrates it's not the only healthier way to do it, but it's also cool as well. So, why will it actually work? So, Durkheim's theory argues that collective norms shape individual actions. So, if the dominant narratives at Mayfield Secondary School shifts to one where vaping is seen as harmful, as necessary, or unattractive, students will internalize these values and adjust their behavior to align with the group. However, with peer mentorship, it's particularly effective because adolescents, teenagers are more likely to be influenced by people they can relate to, they can respect, rather than authority figures like us, because they see us as boring. So, by embedding these new norms into the school's collective consciousness, the behavior can be gradually phased out. It's all about influence. Next is leverage and observational learning. So this one has to do with theorist Alberta Bandura. So the social learning theory, excuse me. So it emphasizes that people learn behaviors by observing others, particularly those they admire or perceive as similar to themselves. So in the context of Mayfield Secondary School, students who see their peers or authority figures vaping may unconsciously adopt their behavior, believing it to be acceptable or rewarding. However, this is my plan. So we create a multimedia campaign centered around observational learning. So it focuses on positive role models within the school community, and the campaign name can be influencers of change. And they will consist of the following components. So for one, testimonial videos. So future students who have quit vaping or have never started will start explaining their choices of the positive outcomes they've experienced, and they include relatable stories so that other people can see how they stopped or why they never started in the first place. So teachers and staff role models, so we can highlight other faculty members who actively promote healthy lifestyles, such as physical education teachers or guidance counselors. They can share their experiences and actively engage with students in wellness initiatives. Next is the interactive challenge, which I think will go very well. So we can launch a school-wide challenge such as Vape Free Weeks, where students pledge to avoid vaping and participate in daily activities like mindfulness sessions or team building exercises, and reward participants with recognition on social media or tangible prizes like school merchandise. So we can also do a visible campaign materials, so place posters, infographics, and art created by students from Mayfield, since we're also an art school, around the school to reinforce the message visually. So, for instance, a poster might feature popular student leading saying, "I'm vape free because I want to breathe easy on and off the field," because they're on an athletics team. So I feel like this is going to work personally because Bandura's observational learning occurs when individuals see others receiving awards for their positive behavior by showcasing relatable role models who benefit from a vape-free lifestyle. So the campaign will encourage students to imitate these behaviors and these strategies will really be a leverage when it comes to the power of the media and peer influence, ensuring that the message reaches students in a format that they find engaging and relatable. So something fun. And lastly, we're going to be doing an implementation on behavioral interventions. And this idea was brought up to me by the theorist B.F. Skinner. So Skinner's operant condition theory, which focuses on how behaviors are shaped by consequences, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, can encourage desired actions, while punishment can discourage undesirable actions. So at Mayfield Secondary School, vaping may persist because students experience immediate gratification, so stress relief or social acceptance without facing immediate consequences. So for this plan, I want to establish a behavioral reinforcement system called Choices Matter. So it will integrate rewards for positive behavior and consistent consequences for vaping. So this system will include point-based incentive program. So students will earn points for participating in healthy vape-free activities such as joining sports teams, attending wellness workshops, or volunteering for school events. So points can be redeemed for prizes like small gift cards, school supplies, or discounted prom tickets or any other kind of tickets that we do as an extracurricular event. And we can do recognition programs, so we can highlight students who exemplify a healthy lifestyle through announcements, newsletters, and awards, as well as campaign of the month. And we can just say that on the announcements to give them some recognitions. Next is educational consequences. So students caught vaping will attend mandatory educational sessions with public health experts. So they will be forced to sit through these sessions and focus on the long-term health effects of vaping and strategies for quitting, rather than rather than just a small punishment. These sessions aim to provide knowledge and support. And lastly, clear policies and accountability. So we're going to establish a zero tolerance policy, absolutely none, for vaping on school grounds. And it's going to be coupled with a transparent reporting system that ensures fairness. So repeated offenders may be required to participate in community service projects that align with health advocacy to ensure that this never happens again. It's going to be zero tolerance. And I think this is going to work because Skinner's operant conditioning theory demonstrates that behaviors reinforced with rewards are more likely to be repeated, while those associated with consequences are less likely to occur. So the incentive program taps into students' desire for tangible benefits, making the effort to remain vape-free really worthwhile. Meanwhile, the educational consequences ensure that those who do vape receive the support system that they need to quit, reducing the ability for them to do it again. So by combining positive reinforcement with fair accountability, the system will create a really balanced approach that encourages long-term behavioral changes. And I think that this will really work. Before I conclude this presentation, I just want to give you a background of what we're going to try and post on social media or even have playing on the announcements so that students know more about vaping and that there are other ways to cope.
Um, Sometimes I really have to use the washroom. My favorite washroom is inclusive washroom, right? And it's because it's the cleanest. And why is people are vaping too much in there? Smoke is all in my face. And one time I inhaled the smoke, secondhand smoke, right? And I just kept on coughing the whole time.
During my time at Mayfield, vaping has been progressively getting worse. From smelling it in the halls, from seeing it in my own classroom, and just being all around people that constantly vape. And it's been affecting me personally because it's been affecting the way I've been learning, my safety, and just the comfortability of my environment.
Okay, well, when I was in high school, back in the day, a lot of kids smoked, or they tried smoking, including me. I tried smoking, and I smoked for probably about 6 months, and I didn't really like it. And so I remember my mom asked me why I smoked, and I said, well, I just want to try it. And so you fast forward to today, and not as many kids smoke cigarettes, but in place of that, a lot of kids vape. And when you ask kids why they vape, most of them vape because they don't have a reason, or they vape because they want to try it. They vape because vape comes in flavors. They vape because it's easier than smoking because you don't have to light up. You can just kind of inhale it and then put it back in your pocket. And so, but at the end of the day, vaping, even though they advertise vaping as the healthy alternative to smoking, it's not a healthy alternative. The chemicals, the makeup you put in vape is just a different kind of toxins that you would otherwise put in your body. So I think my advice would be that don't really vape if it's something you really don't have a reason to do. And at the end of the day, you know what, any kind of substance like that you put in your body, vaping, cigarettes, whatever it is, it's going to have a negative impact on your body. And I really feel that it's important that you have all the facts, that vaping is not safe, it's not an alternative to smoking, it's not a weight loss formula, it's not anything. Vaping is poison, it's toxic, and it's not good for anybody to vape, and so people should really stop and think about that before they do it.
Don't vape.
Don't vape!
Don't vape.
To conclude this presentation, even though vaping is a serious problem, there are very great solutions. Educational campaigns, strict regulations on the marketing of vaping products, and greater family and school involvement in prevention efforts can significantly reduce the appeal of vaping at Mayfield Secondary School. So by providing access to resources for quitting and fostering healthier peer relationships, it can help individuals make informed decisions. With the right combination of prevention, intervention, and support, the negative impacts of vaping can be mitigated and healthier choices can be made to promote for future generations. Thank you for listening.